online with me, I got Ryan Burns with me, who is going to be speaking with us at the 2024 Moon Lake Gathering on August 23rd and 24th at the Altamont City Park in Utah. And what's cool and unique about Ryan is he owns the ranch that's right next door to Skinwalker Ranch. And so I'm pretty excited to hear what he has to say, because as they've ramped up, I'm thinking, Ryan, and you tell me if I'm wrong, as if they've ramped up their stuff, I think things have ramped up on your property, and you've had a lot of strange things going on with your property.
You know, that whole area has been active as long as I can remember. It is something Space Wolf Research, the property that I own, is a place where I used to be taken to kind of look over everything. It overlooks a lot of the high strangeness. It's right there along that verdant valley. And my gosh, since the late 90s, it's been a place of high strangeness. But I'll tell you, it is not anything that, in my opinion, has cooled down in any way, shape, or form. It tends to be as active as ever.
Wow, cool. So
yeah, it's interesting for sure. And you know that Uinta Basin, the whole Uinta Basin is by default a very magical place. And whatever this precognitive sentient intelligence, the trickster, and whatever you want to call him, the indigenous members of the community for many, many generations have called it a variety of different names, including the Skinwalker. It's roamed this area for at least 15 generations that we know of their verbal tradition. And for all we know, maybe before then.
So you're saying it's one, you thinking it's one Skinwalker? You think it's multiple? You think there's a path of the Skinwalkers? You think, what are you thinking? And
I am going to go with the bottom line is I don't know. And I've been taught that, sometimes saying you don't know is the best answer, because all I can do is allude to the research, the investigation, and the studies that have been done before I ever came onto the scene, which was in the late 90s. And realistically, there's a lot of working parts having to do with this. But in the words of those who were involved in black budget projects funded by the Pentagon in the area, they called it a precognitive sentient intelligence, which means that whatever it is, it knows what you're going to do and knows what you're thinking oftentimes before you do. And so you have to be really careful in your headspace. What you think about can manifest. And it does something that has also been termed bidirectional mimicry, which means it can confuse and alter the surroundings or scenarios. Whatever you bring to the table, it can basically mimic and exponentially make more powerful than what you bring to the table. They found this out with high-tech exotic equipment and technologies that they were testing out there. They realized that whatever the trickster, whatever the entity, whatever this precognitive sentient intelligence is, that it has the ability to take what you bring, make it more dazzling, interesting, and in some cases, potentially deadly.
Wow. So, man, I don't want, this is hard because you're going to come and speak to us at the Moon Lake Gathering. So I don't want you to give everything away of what you're going to speak about. So it's hard for me to ask you questions, because I got a million questions I'm thinking right now that I want to ask you, and I don't dare. But so let me get kind of to the basics. How, I guess you've owned this property since the 90s, and why did you purchase this property? Did you know there was a high strangeness there when you purchased it, and is that the reason you purchased it? And
great question. And no, I didn't. I haven't owned the property since the 90s, but I was aware of the property since the late 90s. I had an experience there in this general vicinity in the late 90s. I was working as a fly fishing guide up there, and I injured myself and I couldn't work. And I went around looking for fresh water to fish. And one of the locations that I checked out was right there south of Fort Duchesne. There's a reservoir, a man-made reservoir that was put in by the Central Utah Water Project called Bottle Hollow. It does have water coming out of it. I was trying to find out, what tributaries, what water sources, what rivers were around there. And I took for all intents and purposes, just another ranch road like every other. There was no gates back then. There was no security back then. And I came across something that can only be described as an elderly looking indigenous individual. I don't know if it was male or female, and I don't even know if it was human, to be honest with you, but it had a Native American blanket over its head, and it was kind of robotically coming down off this cliff face. And first of all, it didn't look quite right. Everything looked wrong about the situation. If I would have known the lore, I would have hightailed it out of there, but I didn't. And I rolled down my window and I yelled out, "Hey, can I give you a ride somewhere?" They looked like they were completely out of place, moving very robotically, very stiff. Nothing was responded. They just climbed into my car. I could only make out kind of the nose and the lips, which looked very necrotic, very almost like I was talking to a corpse. And I said, "Where are you headed?" And they just started to mumble. And within a few seconds, I'll tell you, Terry, I was in tears. I didn't know what was going on. It seemed to be kind of going through my mind and picking and choosing the high points and the low points of my life. Sort of like flipping through a Rolodex and picking out the good stuff. I don't know why. I don't know how, but I know that that's what it felt like to me. I lost a few hours of time, and I ended up and over the ridge, spot called Bottle Hollow parking lot there at the Bottle Hollow Reservoir. And I was surrounded by a few Bureau of Indian Affairs officers, really nice guys. They asked me what happened. I had half a mind to not tell them, but I just told them. And they didn't seem surprised in the least.
Really?
In fact, they started talking amongst themselves, and they said, "Well, he looks like he got nabbed by the Skinwalker." Like I said, they weren't surprised. And that's the first time I heard that term, and I was hooked. And I started talking to a lot of other people in the area, Joseph Jr. Hicks, Frank Salisbury, Jack Valet, when he would come up often to visit those two individuals. I met up with Dave Rosenfeld, Ryan Layton, you name it, all of the, what I like to call the old guard of research. People look at me and they think I'm a pretty old guy and I've been doing this for a long time. Well, guess what? People were doing it before me. And it's only recently that this has gotten, worldwide attention and is now famous. But as you know, the Uinta Basin has been a very highly strange location for a long time.
She said Dave Rosenfeld is one of the old time researchers that you hooked up with, and Dave is Alien Dave, I call him. He's going to be speaking with you there at the Moon Lake Gathering. He's a wealth of knowledge, just like you said. But so after this experience that you had, did you call these the Indian Affairs that are the Native Americans there? Did you call them, or they just showed up because you was kind of out of it, or in a out of place or something, or they wanted to know how you got there? Did they interrogate you there, or they just didn't really say much? Or
great question, Terry. So they regularly go around this area, and they saw something out of place, which was me. I was hanging out of my truck, door open, held in by my safety belt, and I was in a catatonic state. Oh, and wow. When they pulled up on me, they thought I was dead until they woke me up, and I just, came right to. But you run into this from time to time with people that have missing time, and missing time is something I wouldn't have believed. You couldn't have sold me that bill of goods if you wanted to in the past. But I'll tell you, after having it happen to me and after seeing strange things happen to others on the property there at Space Wolf Research, your mind starts to open. I've seen guys get shoved down. I've seen one guy, a very, very intelligent, highly connected, intelligent Top secret clearance having individual, tough guy, very, very smart. I've seen him thrown down, broke his nose. Others were with us. You know, I've seen things that you just can't explain. I've had other guys come out. You may know some of them. And, you know, the stuff that transpires is just out of this world. And it never happens when you think it's going to happen. Oftentimes it happens when you think you're safest, when everything seems very calm. I had a gentleman named Doug Wright come out. He's from Colorado, and he's a member of a few groups, very, again, veteran, very familiar with, you know, being safe in the field. And he just came out for a quick tour, and we started walking around. We walked down through a spot, came back, and right where we had just walked, there was a fresh deer leg, like it had just got ripped right clean off of a deer where we had just walked maybe a couple minutes before. Wow. And we hadn't seen anything. It's a wide open area. We didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything transpire. We just walked out, turned around, walked back, and there it was. It wasn't there when we were walking out. And it's stuff like this that makes you realize maybe something's happening behind the scenes somehow by something that's able to hide it from us.
So you said something that I have never heard before, and I never even thought about it. And now I'm wondering, you know, I've heard of missing time, and it's always associated with UFOs and things like that. But you're thinking, or you're saying this missing time was because of this entity, this skinwalker, I guess you want to call it. Or do you think maybe it involved some UFO somehow and you just don't remember that?
Well, it's a very good question. And again, it's one of these bigger questions. You know, as long as I've been into this, you would think by now I would claim to know what's going on. But the longer I'm in it and the more info I have, the more data that I stack up and throw in the filing cabinet, the less I know, because the more versatile this character or this sentient intelligence, this trickster, there could be a variety of things working at the same time here. That's the other option. But whatever it is much more versatile and able to kind of fluidly maneuver around. When you think you just about got it painted in a corner, it'll do something that throws your whole calculation out the window. And so all I've really focused on is a couple things lately. At first I thought, you know, we'll just throw up a bunch of cameras, we'll find out what's going on, and we'll come out and tell people. It's that simple. I think a lot of others have thought the same. But what we find out is that it's much more complex. And there's a lot of different puzzle pieces to this bigger picture. As an example, when it comes to cameras, I was explained by George Knapp and others that it doesn't matter how high tech your camera is, whether you're running Google Fiber, what the heck you have out there, it is going to, in one way or another, baffle that system, that technology. Whatever it utilizes, and I like to call it because I don't want to say he, she, but it is this precognitive sentient intelligence can maneuver its way around technology and seems to have technology that far surpasses anything humanly capable. As an example, you can have a camera that's brand new, wired directly to a power source. Something will transpire, and you may be able to get it down to frame. And whatever is taking place can get so fast that it will actually have certain things happen in between frames. You'll only catch a shadow of what happened on either side of the frame, but we're talking about thousandths of a second in a lot of these cases. And they ran into it with former investigators. I've run into it. Oftentimes the footage itself will get blurry, but yeah, it always seems to outdo the technology. No matter how high tech you think you have it, it can outdo that technology. And I can give you tons of different examples of that. But yeah, that's the bottom line.
So you got this property, you had strangeness things going on. You just thought maybe you wanted to figure it out. And so I guess you've been doing a lot of your own research, like the Skinwalker Ranch. Have you guys corresponded with each other? Do you communicate and say, hey, this happened or that happened to me, and did that happen to you? Do you communicate or anything like that? Or
So we're definitely neighbors. We share a fence line, and but we have different. I think we're different enough, and that goes for a lot of the other neighbors as well. Some neighbors are there just to raise cattle, get along fine with them. They obviously have a television show, and that's fine with me. Space Wolf Research LLC is basically a private real estate company that's experimenting with various research methods to detect and anticipate the anomaly. I'm working mostly with advanced working groups or scientific endeavors and also content creators like yourself and others. But basically what we try to do is utilize science, technology, and neurotheology along with other groundbreaking innovations. The neurotheological aspect, a lot of people say, what's that? And that's kind of my honeypot, or what I think is the most interesting, is the study of the brain and how when these experiences take place, whether it's UFOs or a spiritual experience, it seems to kind of be in the same area of the brain. It tends to have the same part, the same part of the brain is engaged in a way that is neurological. And a lot of these injuries that take place are neurological. I've had some neurological injuries take place on the property. I've had it happen to myself. And what I'm finding is that the brain has a lot more to do with how this high strangeness is interacting with at least human beings. I don't know about animals and the cattle mutilations and all that. But when it comes to human beings, we compartmentalize this in the same area that we would put like having a religious experience or a come to Jesus scenario. We, even though it's an anomaly and it's strange, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, because there's all of them. Some people go out there and they feel better. Some people feel they get healed. Other people come away with injuries that can't be explained. But the bottom line is the brain, how it compartmentalizes those experiences is kind of what I'm most interested in. So that neurotheology. And we've gotten the attention of some pretty interesting individuals, scientifically, some interesting technology corporations, and people that want some of the same answers. So I think we're all kind of, even though we're in the same area, you've got cattle ranchers, you've got people just living there, you've got people making TV shows, you have formerly Pentagon Black projects taking place there, and you got little old me that I'm just trying to figure out how to anticipate when it's going on, what's going to happen, and how it relates to neurotheology or how it relates to being a human being.
so have you talked to the other neighbors? Have they got this stuff happening with their properties also then? So it's not just limited to just a certain area. It's that whole little valley kind of there, right there.
It sure is. It's a lot bigger than you would expect too. This does not know any boundaries. Fence lines are actually something it likes to manifest upon. And the reason I say that is a lot of these liminal entities or, stuff that doesn't seem quite right that we would categorize as paranormal tends to like liminal spaces, and fence lines are a liminal space. So a lot of the manifestation of this high strangeness will take place along property lines or draw you toward the property line or come at you from a property line. Other liminal spaces would be railways, riverways, waterways, which there's also waterways in the area. There's a potential new railway coming in. And it seems like this area has always kind of had Murphy's Law when it comes to weirdness. Originally we had Father Escalante and Dominguez coming through mapping routes for gold, for Spanish gold, which you're more familiar than that with that than I am, but they encountered high strangeness and documented it. And we have then the first secure location in Fort Duchesne with the first band of Buffalo Soldiers maintaining Fort Duchesne and the Utes there. And we got all kinds of strange, esoteric, and occult ritual magic taking place. The Buffalo Soldiers were very, very well versed in ritual magic. They were mostly Prince Hall Masons. They also had voodoo backgrounds. And then, of course, you had the Ute, which were also very capable at their ritual magic. So they were throwing curses back and forth. And then we had the Navajo, who were ousted from the San Luis Valley just over the Colorado border there by the Ute. And they were throwing curses at the Ute. In fact, the curse of the Skinwalker was one of them. So you have this melting pot of all this magic, some of it pretty ugly. And then the Central Utah Water Project comes in, dams up Bottle Hollow Reservoir. That water starts to kind of seep through this Red Rock Mesa that's very porous sandstone, and that ignites and energizes that, especially when there's thunderstorms or any electrical activity in the atmosphere. And then to add insult to injury, they throw in the biggest electrical system you've ever seen along the Mesa, the biggest power lines in the area. And those power lines have since, well, they've always been high EMF, but the casing around the actual power line itself over the years has kind of crumbled, and, you know, they deteriorate, and there's more electromagnetic frequencies coming off of those than ever before. You go under there with an EMF meter, it goes off the chain. And a lot of times people will say, oh, why are we getting such wild readings? And I point and I say, well, there's one reason, you know, a blatant reason, but that interacts with everything else. And all of these things kind of, it seems like everything that can go wrong or right, if you like this sort of thing, does.
So I got a couple comments. One is I work with a lot of Navajos, and they will not even mention the name Skinwalker. You try to talk them about Skinwalkers, and they will turn and run, because they say just even talking about them, just mentioning the name brings them bad luck, and they are terrified of them, you know? So that's an exact truth, because I work with a lot of them, and I've asked them. And another thing, you're talking about the electrical lines and EMF, you know, the radiation of electrical current outside those wires. I'm an electrician. I work on, you know, I've worked on a lot of power plants, and I was working on one in Delta. And when they just first fired that power plant up, where the high transmission lines, the power lines came out of the power plant, and it's going overhead. I can't remember how many volts that is, but it's a lot of volts, you know, 150,000 volts. I don't really remember, but I crawled, they just barely turned the power plant on. I crawled up in a metal building where these transmission lines went overhead. I crawled up on top of this building because I had to do some work on the roof on a fan. And I'm on top of the roof, and I go to get back down. Me and my partner, we go to grab the metal ladder to get back down off the roof, and it shocked us. The voltage leakage, you know, was going through the air and powering up that ladder. That ladder wasn't grounded, and I couldn't even grab it. It zapped me so hard. And I called my boss. I had a radio. I called my boss. I says, man, I can't get off this roof. You got to bring me some hot gloves so I can get down. He says, oh, you're lying. And he comes over and he climbs up just like I did, you know, from the ground, climbing up and getting on the roof. It was just fine. He grabs that ladder and he says, man, there's no problem here at all. I says, you get up here on top of this roof and see. So he gets up on top of the roof, and then he grabs that ladder, and it zapped him. It threw him onto the ground almost, you know? And so they called somebody else, and we got some hot gloves, but man, we had to figure out how to ground that thing. So the voltage leaking, you know, through the air, like you're talking about, sometimes some places it gets pretty substantial, like you're saying. And that's a good observation. Is that creating some of this problem? Is this waking something up? Is this interacting with something else that's in the ground? I don't know.
It's a really, and I don't know either, but it's a really good theory. I'll tell you, the kind of the only reason I've had so many people want to work with me and a lot of this stuff, you know, I have the most fun with the content creators like yourself or the guys that want to make documentaries and stuff like that. That's the most fun. But a lot of the people that want to work with me, they're very hush hush and they don't want any of that. And what I'm finding is they really rely on me to kind of anticipate these anomalies. And like you said, that's one of the biggest things is anticipating when there will be electricity in the air. So if you have a storm front coming in, huge, that's a big deal. If you have, the cycles of the moon come into play, inclement weather of any kind helps. And there's a bunch of other things that help facilitate this or make it more easily anticipated. But if you get all of them at once, I've on multiple projects, I've said it's going down tonight. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And then when it happens, they're baffled. And I said, well, I have to explain to them, this isn't rocket science. Let me show you what I'm going off of. And it's sort of like, looking at an old farmer's almanac. You got a history of this stuff. And the more times you go out there, the more experiences you have, the more often you're able to say, hey, something's going to happen or something isn't. And it's interesting because it really makes you wonder what's happening. Like I said, from a neurotheological standpoint and where as human beings, how it's affecting us, we all know that the brain is just a big, interesting, complex glob of fat, but it uses electrical impulses to function. So it only makes sense that if you have these entities able to, what used to be called the ether. Oh, how funny. While we're talking, there's a thunderstorm coming through. Just started. But while you're, what used to be known as the ether, people used to believe in a lot of the mystery schools, even science, not more than 100 years ago, that the ether was a thing and it held energy. That's kind of been tossed by the wayside. But I think there's something to it. When you have electrical impulses in the skies, and as an electrician, I think it's cool that you have a background in this. It may affect how we see or perceive things. So is it all in our minds? I don't think so, because cameras are catching it too.
So I got to ask you, have you ever done any scanning on the ground in your property? And I'm asking for a specific reason, any ground penetrating radar or anything like that?
You bet. We've done the charges. We've done the ground penetrating radar. We have the long cable systems, the fiber optics that we put down these cracks. And let me tell you, some of these cracks, I don't even know what to call them. The basin's strange, but one really strange thing that happens out at Space Wolf Research and a lot of the properties around it is that the ground will just open up overnight. And sometimes it'll open up as much as 18 inches and you'll have this long crack going down a field or a pasture. And you can run a little camera system down, not dissimilar or unlike the ones that they stick into your plumbing, when you're looking for a break in a line or something like that. And you put it down in there, and the deepest one we've gotten is about 50 feet. And there's no explanation as to why the ground opens up, but there are very much caverns under there. And then many times, again, overnight, you'll come back in the morning and it's all closed back up and the wind will come by and you can't even tell that it was ever there. So yeah, there's something going on under there. There are
crazy
caverns. And we've measured some of those things and there's very much strange oddity.
I've never heard anything like that. That is crazy. Is it, does that happen to your neighbors? Does that happen? Or is that just that's just a normal thing out there?
It happens to neighbors on both sides of me, on all sides of me. And
wow.
It's just hard to explain. Some people explain it off with the oil fields, which there's a very massive oil field. Crescent Point Energy has one just south of Space Wolf Research. And one theory is, well, they're sucking so much oil out, maybe the ground gives and then comes back together. That's a great theory. But the strange thing is, I've talked to some old timers and they said that it was happening long before the oil fields ever came in.
Man, I'm just flabbergasted. I'd never heard such thing like that. That's for, there's no noise when that happens or anything. It just happens. That's crazy.
Now you will hear some noises underground, and that not only that, you'll be sometimes walking along, and it'll feel like the ground moves. It's almost like an earthquake, but I'm not sure that it is, Terry. I've had instances where I'm out there with groups doing tests and corporate guys, and you name it, and all of a sudden everybody will stop and say, "Did you feel that?" And you can feel the ground moving. We go back and we look it up online to see if there was any tectonic activity or movement. They measure that frequently from the University of Utah, and they keep documented data on that. And it's nothing out of the ordinary. So I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is taking place in the human mind or if it's really transpiring right there under our feet.
That's crazy. Well, the reason I asked if you'd done any ground penetrating radar, I got a crazy story to tell. So I had this guy contact me that had hijacked a military satellite that had infrared tech capabilities and whatnot. And then he said that he developed some kind of a program, or his friend developed some kind of a program where they could take and run the pictures through, and it would amplify, and they could see certain things. Kind of, I'm imagining like D-stretch, when you take a picture of a petroglyph, the petroglyph, the paintings on it, and if you run it through the D-stretch, the colors that you can't see with the naked eye, this brings them out so that you can see what it looks like. I'm imagining it's something like this, and I can't imagine that anybody could really hijack and get control. I mean, he claimed he had real-time control of this satellite. And that's hard for me to imagine, but that's what he says. He contacted me and said that he was able to locate treasures, and he wanted to know if if I knew any spots that he could scan for me. And I thought, man, I'm not going to tell this guy where some of my spots are, And so at the time, I says, have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch? Scan it. Because I thought at one time you talked about the Buffalo Soldiers being in that area, and then there was a symbol on Skinwalker Ranch that's kind of Masonic looking, and I thought maybe that was put there by the Buffalo Soldiers. But I'd heard that the Indians paid in gold the Buffalo Soldiers to move a treasure and to chop down a bunch of trees that had Spanish markings on them. And so I thought, I wonder, if this is the area, because the Buffalo Soldiers were stationed near that. So as I scan this area, and the guy says, do they have bunkers on the property? And I says, well, I don't know. I can try and find out. And he says, yeah, well, this isn't on Skinwalker Ranch. And at the time, I was thinking it was Skinwalker Ranch, but here, 6 months ago, a year ago, I went through my notes and my recordings, and he said it's not. It's on the property next to Skinwalker Ranch, and I don't know if that's your property, a different direction. Have no idea. But he said the property next to Skinwalker Ranch. He says, man, it looks like there's bunkers under there, some kind of a base under there. It looks, and he sent me scans, and look, he says there's stairs. And then he said a lot of strange things started happening, that this thing started tracking back from the satellite to who he was and messed with his computer. And so he went to his friend's computer, and it messed that computer up. And he says, I don't even know how this is even possible. Somehow this is tracked back to who I am. And he says, I'm out of here. I'm done. And he disappeared.
That falls right into line with a lot of the reasons that I bought Space Wolf Research. You probably heard of Joe McMoneagle. He's one of the world's most famous remote viewers, and he's out at the Monroe Institute now a lot of the time. And when he came out to, among other things, remote view that area, he said something very similar, Terry. He said that in that particular area, that southern quadrant, as he called it, that there was an underground, potentially dimensional base, some sort of subterranean bunker, for lack of a better word. And he said that there was non-human involvement. And all this stuff sounds really far-fetched. I'm right there with anybody that thinks it's weird. But, as time goes on, you get enough of these strange stories, you start to believe. Space Wolf Research sat, it wasn't always called that. I called it. I had to call it something. And I thought it would be fun. Everybody was saying, let's go up to SWR, and which obviously stands for something else. But to not have to change the terminology, I thought, well, I'll just call it something that goes along with that, so we all know where we're talking about. And, you know, it sat vacant for many years. And I've since befriended and talked to the gentleman that grew up there as a kid, and he had strange stuff happening when he was growing up there as a kid. It sat there vacant, and a group of researchers, along with Alien Dave, they knew him very well, but these three researchers, there's April Slaughter, Matt Groening, and Rich Oliver, went up, and more or less, you know, it was abandoned ranch, and they knew they were pretty much in the area, the hot spot of paranormal activity. And they had some of the scariest, freakiest stuff happen to them while they were camping out that only later did I find out actually took place there. I heard about their story, and it freaked me out. And I was always searching for where it happened, but I never found it. And then one day, April Slaughter said, it happened here. It happened here at your property. And I thought, oh my gosh. And, you know, they, for lack of a better word, interacted with some of these kind of non-human entities. And among one of them, Rich Oliver was a really big guy, just a beast of a man, really good musician in Salt Lake as well. He was known as Papa Croc. But he went around the vehicle to basically take a leak away from the camp. And he said that an entity that looked like it was made up of little particulates or bugs kind of manifested, all became one. It was taller than him. It was bigger than him. It grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up over the car, and it downloaded something into him. And I mean, like I said, really big guy, not somebody to be intimidated, but somebody that I would believe this coming from. They were all medical professionals in the health industry at the time. And basically they all came away, and they had so many strange events happen that, you know, I mean, everything from big black crabs latching onto their legs. One of them, Matt Groening, had that happen. April Slaughter had a bunch of strange stuff happen. They saw this weird flannel man entity going around the fire. You name it, it happened. So they went and had hypnotic regression. And the one thing that they all agreed on is that all these things took place, and they also believed that they had some sort of nasal implant put in their heads.
Really?
Oddly enough, when asked why, they believed that whatever this intelligence is wanted them to bring more people out to the area. And believe it or not, that's one of the reasons I limit how many people come out, because it seems like this thing, whatever it is, likes to interact with people. It enjoys that interaction. That interaction can sometimes be malevolent, and oftentimes has been reported as coming home with individuals, no matter how far away from the area they live. It's known as the hitchhiker effect, and it's been very well documented in government studies, you name it. But so I like to limit exposure, let's say, to the outside world a little bit. But it does, I don't know, it does seem to like it and enjoy it. And I think that part's cool. Whatever it is, it likes to play the game.
So, I don't know if that'd be cool or not. If something grabs you by the neck and lifts you up, man, that'd be pretty scary. I think I'd be hightailing it out of there right now. So, anyways, yeah. Ryan, man, I really appreciate that you're coming and you're speaking at the Moon Lake Gathering, August 23rd and 24th, and you're going to be sharing some of these things that have happened there, you know, sharing some of the experiences, what's happened there, and people can get an insight of this type of stuff, of what's happening, you know, and that's pretty exciting to me. I'm not really a UFO guy. I'm a treasure hunter guy, but I also like out of place archaeology, man. If we find a buried UFO that's been there for thousands of years, that's out of place archaeology to me. And I'm all over it. I want to know something about that. I don't know if I want to play with the unseen entities, and real live UFO people. I don't want to mess with them guys. They're like the dark spirits that scares me, but it's interesting to me. And there's a lot of people that will be there that is going to really enjoy your story and hearing what you have to share. And so I really appreciate you for that. And so you got any final words or anything that you want to say?
Yeah, you can pretty much bet that whatever it is you're looking for, you'll find. And and that means, in the general area, not just right there. I'd say that whole Dinosaur Diamond, pretty much a whole 80 square mile radius area, there's a lot of everything. Like you said, Bigfoot, UFOs, cryptozoological creatures, you name it. It's treasure hunting. It's all right there. And there's no better conference, in my opinion, to incorporate them all at a free price. And 25th year anniversary this year, and there's no reason for people not to come out. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. Everybody that's there is very interested in doing it. They want to be there. They're not just there for a paycheck. And 25 years, that's a long time for the Moon Lake Gathering, aka the Morgan Powwow, to be going on. And I'm just happy to be a part of it, and I appreciate you guys including me.
Man, we appreciate that you being a part of it, and you're exactly right. This is free to everybody. It's not free to us, but we have some costs. But people have been donating money to us and all that, and it's helped cover them costs. We want to keep the costs down for everybody so that everybody can come out and enjoy it. And this isn't a money making thing for us. You're donating your time. I'm donating my time. It costs me in gas and food and travel just the same as it does everybody else. We don't make one dime on this. This is just for everybody to get and meet like-minded people and to network with those type of people. And there's been so many friendships made there. And that's going to be the real power of this conference. This Moon Lake Gathering is just to meet new friends from all across the country. I was absolutely shocked at how many people came from all across the country, and I don't know, you was there last year, wasn't you, Ryan?
Yeah.
And so, it's getting bigger and bigger. Kent told me that, there was like 740 people there last year. I don't know if there was that many. I didn't have time to count, but he did. Maybe he did. But there was a lot of people there. A lot of people.
That is a ton of people. And like you said, I met people from all over the country. I couldn't believe it. I would have thought there's just a bunch of locals, but there's them too, which is important because they know the area. And it's a great time, family friendly, food trucks. There's plenty of places to camp out, do whatever you're going to do. And a great group of people. You can't get bored unless you want to. And, this year, are you, I don't know if you're going to be one of the ones that are coming out to the property to camp out a little bit.
I might be. Okay.
Be.
But I know that Dan Dillman, he's coming. He's kind of a UFO guy. I didn't know this. I thought he was just a treasure hunter. So he's got the special night vision goggles that records and all that. You can be bringing that stuff. You probably got all that stuff too. That's way over my head, man. I'm just a treasure hunter. But yeah.
That's cool. I'm going to talk to Dan later this week, and I'm excited. He's very knowledgeable about the area, and that's great. Yeah, it'd be great to talk more with both of you. And yeah, don't be too scared of the place. Whatever, you're a pretty lighthearted guy, and it seems like usually the people. I'll just be honest. I'll just say it. The people that have the creepiest experiences are like those really intense, security-minded, ex-special forces, very defensive individuals. They're the ones that have the worst experiences because maybe they just don't know how to take her easy, So they bring all that uptight energy to the game, and sometimes it gets kind of sent back their way, sort of like holding a mirror up. And I think that's why. But I don't like to make stereotypical analysis, but that, in my experience, which is very limited, that's what I've found is like those high intensity, super defensive individuals are the ones that usually run off and say, "Oh my goodness." But well-natured, individuals like yourself, I think you'll have a great time. And I have so many treasure hunting questions to ask you. I don't even know where to start. But I'll finish off with my final question to you, and biggest question is: you've probably talked to more people than I even knew were involved with, like, the Lost Roads mine, Carrie Shinob. You've talked to the Rhodes, you've talked to just about everybody, and you've heard all the stories. What's been your favorite takeaway story, or one of your favorite takeaway stories of the Lost Roads mine before we kind of wrap it up?
So it's interesting to me, that the Uinta Mountains is as you dive into this, the Uinta Mountains is a special place. You can't just go out there and find raw gold on the ground. These mountains are newer mountains. These mountains they haven't eroded to expose the gold vein layers. However, there are pockets of areas that do have this gold that shoot up from the ground, and the Spaniards found these with the help of the Indians. But more than that, what I really think is it might really have something to do with Montezuma's treasure, where Montezuma and them got their gold in the first place. That the Carrie Shinob could be a place. If it's not the Aztec where they've hidden their treasures, the Aztec took it back to the ancient native homelands, it could be there. But it's also said that it's a place where King Solomon could have got his treasures, his gold and stuff. The Uinta Mountains are a unique, special place, and there is so many stories, so much history with the UFO, with the Bigfoot, with the treasures, with ancient stuffs. I've been tracking down some ancient stuffs that has been going on in the Uinta Mountains, and I don't even know what to say. There's just so many incredible stories that had to deal with the pioneers, with the Indians, with that it's just a and plus it's a beautiful place to be. It's a fascinating place to be.
It really is. And for those who don't believe there's gold up there, I'll tell you a little story. As I said, I'm a fly fisherman, and I used to fly fish a lot all around the Uintas. And one time I was over there at Soapstone Basin, a pretty well-known place. I remember that time there happened to be albino trout, which are really easy to see. And we were having a heck of a good time. And I was with my grandfather, and I found a little nugget right there in the stream. And, my grandpa said, "Oh, it's probably pyrite or something." Well, we took it to town, and, I got a few $100s for it. It was gold. So it's in there. I mean, it's in there.
So in that Soapstone Basin, there's some great stories of Lost Roads mines, Spanish mines in that area. But a long time ago in the 80s, I was venturing into that area and looking around, and I happened to see some huge pine trees that had a shadow mark on it. Like there had been a mark on it, but the tree had completely grown over that mark, and so all you could see was just the shadow of what it was. I thought, I'm just seeing things. But I go in the direction it kind of said to go, and all of a sudden I noticed that exact shadow mark again on another huge pine tree, and I followed that for over a mile, and then I lost the trail. I couldn't find it anymore. But something went on over there. There's a story in that area where somebody seen a giant. I don't know if it was a giant or a Sasquatch or something, lift up a rock that was on a hinge that went down into a vault where there was Spanish, I don't know if it's Spanish, but gold bars, and they was adamant that this was a true story. And I'm thinking, this sounds crazy. This can't be real, but they was adamant that this was real. So there's a lot of interesting things, and that's cool to know that you found a gold nugget there.
And I guess I thought it's not as unique as I thought. Other people have too. This is, and that's just a fairly easy to access stream right off the highway, let alone, as there's all kinds of more interesting waterways You can find all kinds of cave systems up there in the Red Cloud Loop. I mean, those go on forever. Sheep Creek, there's anyway, they're big.
Oh man,
there's
you venture into my stomping grounds over on the Flaming Gorge side. I got a small place over in Manila, so I'm up there and I hunt in them areas. I'm up there all, and I found some strange that it looks like ancient old stone walls up there in the Uintas in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
There's some interesting things all over in the Uintas, and when you start hiking them and looking, you just never know.
Especially in your neck of the woods there on the North Slope. There's so much history, and my gosh, but yeah, that whole place is like Swiss cheese. There's so many cave systems, and there's no telling what could be in there.
So there's a guy been coming to the Moon Lake Gathering the last few years, and 2 years ago he pulled me to the side and says, "I got to show you these coins I found up in the Sheep Creek area." And he showed them to me. He says, "I think these are Spanish." And I'm looking at these things are old and these things are war. Man, he's got a handful of them. They looked Roman to me. They looked Roman. They were so worn you really couldn't tell. But there's stories that the Romans was up there. That sounds absolutely crazy. Romans over here? Never really heard of that until you start hearing that there's been Roman artifacts found. A short sword found in Texas. Some of the old chainmail, the armor, and that in the Redmond salt mine. Somebody was telling me that when they first found them in the late 1800s, they broke in there, found some Roman artifacts in there, and then the Roman artifacts with the Tucson lead crosses and stuffs like that. Think maybe this isn't as far-fetched, and the Roman coins that have been found. I have a friend, Gypsy, who found an old Roman coin in the river in Florida. Maybe it's not as far-fetched that the Romans were over here. And it absolutely sounds crazy, but why are these artifacts being found here?
That's the truth. There is, like you said, there's even, I'm sure there's some Templar stuff that can be found in those hills. And, one of the strangest coin finds that I had right there on the property at Space Wolf Research was an 1800s Chinese coin, with the hole in it. And I thought, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. And I started asking around and doing some research. And it turns out that there was a gentleman named Hop Sing who ran a trading post out of Fort Duchesne. He had a couple of native wives. And he was from China, and he would walk all around that area. And for whatever reason, he is most likely where that coin came from with the timestamp. But you can find anything out there, and when you start doing your research, like that example, you realize that, there's been all kinds of people all over through there, whether it's Spanish gold, Templars, the Chinese, you name it. It's unbelievable, the rich history that Utah has.
And I got to tell you, and I'm sure you've already seen it. You've been up to McConkey's Ranch in Dry Fork, just outside of Vernal. Anybody coming that's out of state or out of town that has never been or seen these petroglyphs at McConkey's Ranch, you need to make a special side trip to go up there, McConkey's Ranch, and see these petroglyphs. These things are the most unique petroglyph, in my opinion, in the whole United States. These things are life-size. These things are not only carved, they're painted, and the paint's kind of faded, but you can still see the paint. I can imagine when these things were fresher, that these things were spectacular, but these guys are wearing crowns, breastplates, jewels, they got swords. They got, these things are spectacular. These aren't your regular Indians. In fact, you can see regular Native American petroglyphs carved over the top of some of these in some places, And so these things, I don't know if they're Aztec, Egyptian, but they are spectacular. And some of them have 6 fingers and 6 toes. Some people theorize that it has to deal with the giants, It's if you haven't ever seen these things, you need to make a trip there. It's well worth it. And the McConkey family, man, God bless their souls, because it's on private property. They could have locked this whole thing up and not let anybody get on there and see, and they graciously let everybody go up there. They've had trails built so you can get around and see it easier. They just ask for donations. They don't really charge anything, but these things are spectacular. And if you come out this way, you need to make that one of your trips.
That, you're not kidding. God bless that family. It is a national treasure. And my goodness, like you said, new. Can you imagine seeing those new? You're coming through the area, and some of them are very graphic, holding heads bleeding out. And obviously, a lot of the stuff they're wearing, like you said, Terry, just doesn't fit the mainstream archaeological narrative. They have very much Aztec and really older than that imagery. And I've heard some tales that we'll have to talk one-on-one about.
Cool.
Because I don't know, but there's a lot to that place. And man, I can't imagine coming through there and seeing those brand new. I know I'd be hightailing that out of there. Do you think those were a warning potentially for people coming through?
I don't know if they were a warning or not, but for them to take, I mean, it's just not like there's a few of them. There is a lot of these, and do you know about, you seen the Windblown Caves, or that they say it's Windblown Caves, just as you start up Dry Fork Canyon as you're going up on the right-hand side in two holes. Have you ever been over to there?
I have.
So if you notice in there, and you got to look close, over the edge of one of them, you can see some of these McConkey Ranch type petroglyphs there, the guys with the, and it's faded and worn so bad, but you can see the jewelry, you can see the, the crown, the horn or whatever it's got, you can see that, the paint's all wore off because it's exposed to the elements. But if you go inside the cave, and there's been a ton of bonfires there's been a ton of and the sandstone, because of the fires and all that, it's peeled the sandstone off. But if you look around, you can closely see that whole cave was adorned with these figures, painted, carved. You can see it. And I just imagine that was some kind of a ceremonial place, that it was some kind of a spectacular place, where they did ceremonies. That whole inside of that was lined with that stuff, and was that a warning, or was this just a place where they gathered and had ceremonies? Was this place, obviously, if you've seen that stuff and you're traveling through there and you're wondering, man, whoever did these, man, they're taking heads, man. I don't want to be losing my head. So yeah, that would definitely have to scare you if you're new going into that area, way back when.
And, true to your point, it's interesting that a lot of the data coming out about studying the connection to the Aztecs is pretty amazing. From a DNA standpoint, it does appear that the Ute are the closest relatives to the Aztec. So you got to ask yourself, is it possible? Did the Aztecs start up in the Uinta Basin and move down? Or is it the other way around, as they're telling us? The truth is, nobody knows.
I just know that there's a spectacular history that went on, and man, wouldn't it be great to have a time machine to go see what really happened? Because what really happened is man, it's spectacular. What they was able to do, what they did, the pictures they portray. What is the real history? Yeah, and I guess we'll never know, but it's great to try and figure it out.
I'm glad they wrote some of it there on the rocks, because otherwise, and like you said, it's not just petroglyphs; they're also pictographs, which is so unique. Man, and I'm really excited to see you at the Moon Lake Gathering, and I can't wait to talk to you all. Everybody up there is always so knowledgeable, and I look forward to it.
Brian, have you got social media? You got web pages? You got all that stuff? Tell me about that.
Sure. My YouTube is Hero Paranormal, and on social media, you can find me at Space Wolf Research or Hero Paranormal. You can also go to spacewolfresearch.com or heroparanormal.com.
So I just want to say, they can go and research who you are on your social media stuffs. But you know what's even better than that is come and meet you in person at the 2024 Moon Lake Gathering on August 23rd and 24th. And we're going to have a great time. And if you're seeing this after August 2024, you missed a great deal and you missed meeting Ryan. So that said, that's a wrap.